Hi everyone, it's Eamonn Boyle at Instil Software, and today we're going to take a look at Docker. We're going to take a look at using Docker as part of our development workflow. We're going to be looking at it in Windows, but it's pretty much the same no matter what your platform. Okay, so let's start by installing Docker, and depending on your platform, this is more or less easy. So we can go to the Docker store, and within the Docker store, we have a community edition and an enterprise edition. So we would want the community edition. And then here we have it for all the different platforms, okay? And the installation instructions are all there. It'll be different depending on whether or not you're doing it for Mac or Linux. I'm in Windows here, so I would go to Windows, and then I can just download it here and just run through the installer. And it's really simple. So once Docker's installed, we can start to make use of it from the command line. Okay. Now I'm on Windows, but I'm using the Bash that ships with Git. This is Git Bash, just because I like the terminal and I like some of the Linux commands. But you can use this from PowerShell, or you can use it from a normal command prompt. And all of the commands are Docker followed by one or more subcommands. So if we type Docker, we can see that there's quite a few subcommands here. Okay, and one of the most useful commands when you first install it is to do Docker version, and this will show us the versions of what we have here. And we've got a client, and you can see that the client, I'm using the latest community edition, and you can see that the client is running on 64-bit Windows, but you can see then that there's a Docker engine or server or daemon, and it's running on Linux AMD64. And that's because the way Docker runs is we have this client-server architecture. The server does all of the actual work, and we don't have containerization native in Windows, at least not in Windows 10 Professional. We have native containerization in Windows Server, but that's not what most of you are going to be using for your development. So what actually happens here is that it runs a little virtual machine, and it uses Hyper-V to do that virtualization. And you can see here that there's an instance of Moby Linux running. So we have native containerization in Linux. So when you're using this on a Mac or Windows 10 Professional, what it's going to do is it's going to spin up a virtual machine running Linux, and then the native client, the native Mac client or Windows client, is going to talk to that engine. Okay, but I can see that everything's up and running, so now I can start to run some programs. Okay, so one of the things as developers we often need to do is to spin up a database, and maybe we populate with some dummy data, or maybe we want to try lots of different kinds of databases depending on which application we're working on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run MySQL database. So I can do Docker run and then MySQL, and that would run an image called MySQL. The way that I would find that image is that I would go to the Docker Hub, and Docker Hub is a repository of lots of useful images, and I can do a search for something that I'm looking for. So in this case it would be MySQL, and I would find the image that I need. So here I've got an official MySQL image. This would tell me the name, different versions that are available, and it would give me some instructions on running it. And this would basically run it. But because we're running up a database, we might want to run it in the background, so that would be -d. I might want to have it hosted on this local machine, so in that case I need to expose the ports, because when we run this in Docker, it's completely isolated inside a container. So I'm going to say open up port 3306 on the container and map it to 3306 on my machine. So that's going to open up the port. So if I connect to localhost 3306, then I'm going to be routed through to this container. And the last thing I need to do is something specific for my SQL image, and that's set up a root password. So this is going to be different for different kinds of images. The way you'd find the instructions is you'd look at the image page and find out the instructions. And if you look in the MySQL page, you'll find that it says you need to set a password, and it's set through an environment variable called MySQL root password. So I use -e as the Docker run option, to set an environment variable. The environment variable I want to set is MySQL root password, if I can type it, and I'm going to set it to something really secure like password. and that's it. I've now got a running MySQL database. Okay, we can prove that out if I go into data group here. I can add a new data source, MySQL. The password I've set to password, and I'm running on localhost. And if we go in here, we can see that we are connected to the database. And then we could actually create proper databases for whatever applications we want. Okay, and you see how quickly that spun up? That's because it had already downloaded that image. Okay, and then to spin up the containers once you have the image is really fast. Okay, I can see that running by doing docker ps. We can see here that this was started 48 seconds ago. It's running. If I do docker ps -s, I can see the size. And we can see that the image is 407 megabytes, but this container is only using 4 bytes. Because the Docker works using mutable layering, and it means that containers can share images and only store the differences. So when they do writes, they have their own data when they write, but they share the base image. So I can run multiple containers of an image very quickly, very efficiently. Okay. So there's lots of useful images. For example, I can run another database. I can do docker run, and I know that there's an image called Postgres, which will start a Postgres image. Again, I'm going to want to run it in the background, so I use -d. I'm going to open up a port, so again, I can access it from this local host. On Postgres, it's a different port, it's 5432. And again, I'm going to want to set the password, so I would look on the image page and find out for Postgres, how do I do that? And I know that it's an environment variable called Postgres password. So again, let's be really secure and go for password. And I've now got a Postgres database running. Okay, so everything that I need to install and run a Postgres database is contained within that image, within this image called Postgres. And as a developer, I can package up other processes, my own programs and services, so it's this easy for other people to run. I can define configuration points such as environment variables, where the users of my image can then configure it dynamically. And I can test that database is running again in data group. I can add a data source. I can go to Postgres, localhost again. This time the username is Postgres, and again this would be just something that you would know from the database. I know my password is password, and we can see here that the database is running. Okay. Again, I can do docker ps, and I can see both of them running. And when I want to kill them, I can just do kill, specify the IDs, and that's killed the containers. Okay. Now the containers are actually still there. If I do docker ps -a, I can see that they're still there, and I could restart them. In this case here, I don't want to restart them, so I'm just going to remove them. So I can say docker container prune, and that will remove all stopped containers. And now I've got no remnants of those databases left on my machine. Okay, so as a developer, this is really nice. Very simple to run up these images. There's lots of images on Docker Hub that you can look for. You can spin up web servers. You could spin up instances of Jenkins or whatever you need. There's loads of images up there, and then as you get more advanced with Docker, you can actually build your own images and distribute those around the team. So for onboarding, for building applications, for doing development work, for sandboxes, this stuff is really useful. So hopefully that was informative. I'm going to do a few more Docker videos, so if you'd like to see anything, post some comments below. This has been Eamonn Boyle for Instil Software. Thanks for tuning in.